In the world of economics, it seems like something really strange is going on. We're talking about the possibility of a U.S. sovereign wealth fund, and what's really wild is that it's got support from both Trump and Biden.
Yeah, you don't see them agreeing on much these days, do you?
Not exactly known for their common ground, are they? But this sovereign wealth fund idea, they're both on board, so we gotta ask, what's got everyone so fired up about it?
Well, I think it really speaks to a potential sea change, in how we think about economic strategy. It's not just about managing money, but using it as a tool for global leadership.
Okay, so before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's break it down for anyone who might not be familiar with sovereign wealth funds. What are we even talking about here?
So, in the simplest terms, it's basically a government owned investment fund. It's kind of like if a country had a savings account, but instead of just, stashing cash under the mattress, they're investing in different things companies, real estate, big projects. You see in countries like Norway, UAE, they've been doing this for years, using their oil wealth to build these massive funds.
So it's about more than just making money. It's about, like you said, securing their economic future.
Absolutely. And that's where economist Richard Duncan comes in. His book, The Money Revolution, really digs into this, and he's been pretty vocal about the US needing one of these funds. But his vision, let's just say it's anything but ordinary.
Ordinary isn't exactly Duncan's style, is it?
Not at all.
This guy's talking about a potential $10 trillion investment over the next decade, maybe even more. I mean, those are some serious numbers.
Well, absolutely. It's a bold proposition.
It's like monopoly money, but on a scale that could completely reshape, well, everything.
At the heart of it, his argument is that the US has got to make some big moves to stay top dog, especially with China breathing down our necks. He says investing massively in emerging technologies, things like AI, robotics, clean energy, that's not just about economic growth anymore. It's about national security.
So it's not just about turning a profit, it's about making sure America stays ahead of the game globally. And Duncan's clearly not afraid to propose some, let's say, audacious ideas to get us there. But how does he actually see this whole thing working?
Well, his model is kind of interesting. He's talking about a joint venture kind of approach. The government would partner with the private sector, provide capital, but in exchange, they'd get equity stakes in these emerging tech companies.
So instead of just handing out checks, the government becomes a major shareholder.
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost like this giant government-backed venture capital fund placing bets on the future.
You got it. He suggests a 60-40 split. The government with the majority stake, but they'd be leveraging the expertise, the agility of those private companies to really make things happen.
That's a really fascinating concept. So you get the scale and resources of the government, but with the drive and the entrepreneurial spirit of the private sector. But let's talk about the elephant in the room here. How do you fund something of this magnitude? We're talking trillions of dollars. Yeah, where does that kind of money even come from?
Well, that's where Duncan's proposal takes this really interesting turn. He's suggesting we finance this whole thing, this massive plan, through quantitative easing.
QE.
Yeah, QE.
Okay, for those of us who maybe skipped a few econ classes, can you give us a little refresher on how that works?
Sure. So basically, imagine the government pumping money into the economy. They're essentially printing it and using it to buy stuff, like bonds, right? And this whole thing, it's supposed to get money flowing, stimulate growth. We saw it during the 2008 crisis, again with the pandemic.
Right, but that was all supposed to be temporary, right? Like a quick fix, not a long-term strategy.
Exactly. But here's where Duncan gets really creative. Instead of selling those bonds back into the market, he's saying, what if the Fed just held on to them? Indefinitely.
Hold on, so it's like borrowing from yourself and just hoping you get so rich you never have to actually pay it back. That's kind of what it sounds like.
In essence, yeah. So the government wouldn't be on the hook for repaying the principal, right? And any interest made on those bonds, well, that goes right back to the Treasury. It's like a cost-free program, at least for taxpayers, in the here and now.
Okay, but even if that works, I gotta ask, doesn't that sound a little too good to be true? I mean, what about inflation? That's a lot of money to just pump into the system.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And yeah, there are definitely critics who say, look, pumping trillions into the economy, even gradually, it's going to cause inflation to go haywire.
Right.
But Duncan, he pushes back on that. He says the returns, the gains we'd see from these groundbreaking technologies would be huge, like transformative even, enough to outweigh any inflationary pressure.
So it's a gamble, for sure. High stakes, betting big on the future of American innovation. But what I find really interesting here, this isn't just some fringe idea, right? This is gaining some serious traction, like way up top. We talked about Trump and Biden, how they've both said they're open to this.
And that's what's really remarkable about this whole thing. It's got this weird bipartisan support, which I think tells us something's changing. It's like
Yeah.
both sides are looking around, seeing how the world is shifting economically, geopolitically, and they're realizing, okay, maybe the US needs to switch things up.
We can't just react anymore. We got to be the ones making the moves.
Exactly. And a big part of that is China. Let's be real, they are not messing around. They are pouring money into tech, AI, quantum computing, renewables, you name it.
Yeah, it's like they looked at the chessboard and said, okay, new game.
Exactly. And it's not about just keeping up anymore. It's about taking the lead in all these industries that are going to shape the future.
Yeah.
Healthcare, manufacturing, energy, even defense. It's about who's going to control the economy, have the global influence, who gets to define what progress even looks like in this century.
So, yeah, the stakes are huge. This whole sovereign wealth fund idea, it comes with risks, sure, but it also potentially has huge rewards. It's a potential tool, right, for dealing with a future that, let's be honest, feels pretty uncertain. It makes you wonder, though, what happens if this thing actually picks up steam? What if this whole sovereign wealth fund thing actually happens? Like, what would that world even look like?
It's kind of mind-blowing when you really think about it. Instead of just, setting the rules, the government's right there in the thick of it, shaping the direction of entire industries.
So we're talking like a massive surge in investment, like the kind of money that leads to, I don't know, curing cancer or something.
Exactly. Like those big, ambitious projects we've seen in the past. Think like the Human Genome Project or the space race. But this time, it's focused on the industries of the future.
So instead of astronauts, we've got like renewable energy pioneers and, robot doctors. What would that even look like?
Yeah, totally. The US could become the place to be for all that stuff. Renewable energy, personalized medicine, advanced robotics, you name it. We could see entirely new sectors popping up based on technology that's still like sci-fi right now.
It's a pretty wild thought, but it's not just about the technology itself, right? It's the impact. Imagine a ton of new jobs, all high-paying manufacturing coming back. I mean, we could see breakthroughs in healthcare that, like you said, actually change people's lives in a real way.
Absolutely. But I do have to play devil's advocate here for a second. You need some serious oversight, independent audits, probably a whole new way of looking at how the government invests in general.
So, like any big, bold idea, there are definitely some potential downsides, along with the exciting possibilities. But you got to give Duncan credit. He's got people talking about this and not just, the usual political back and forth. This goes deeper. It's about what role America wants to play in the world, what we want the future to look like.
Totally. And whether you're on board with Duncan's plan or not, he's making us think about some big questions. The world's changing fast, and standing still is not an option. We have to be bold, strategic, and honestly, a little bit uncomfortable with shaking things up if we want to stay ahead of the curve.
It's a call to action for sure. This whole conversation reminds us the future isn't something that just happens to us. We make choices, take risks, and hopefully shape a future we actually want to live in. And the sovereign wealth fund idea, it's messy, it's controversial, but it gives us a really interesting glimpse of what might be possible. Thanks for diving into this with me. Always fascinating to pick your brain about this stuff.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.